Hulk Hogan's final goodbye to his daughter will break your heart. In this emotional farewell, witness the last FaceTime call between the wrestling legend and his daughter before his tragic passing. In this video, we take you behind the scenes of Hulk Hogan's final moments, revealing a touching, personal goodbye that fans never saw coming. From his declining health to the emotional words exchanged with his daughter, this video captures a side of the Hulkster that few have seen. The hospital room was still, eerily still. The walls, once decorated with championship posters and handwritten cards from fans, now echoed with a different kind of silence. This wasn't the Hulk Hogan the world had grown up watching. There was no red and yellow bandana, no thunderous entrance music, no flexing of muscles to wild chants of Hogan. Instead, lying quietly beneath sterile white sheets, barely visible beneath the tangle of wires and machines, was Terry Bollea. Frail. Breathing in shallow intervals. Fighting the clock outside, the sun was setting over the Florida coastline, casting a soft amber hue over the glass windows of the hospital. Nurses walked by, their voices hushed. Doctors gave tight-lipped nods. Everyone inside that wing knew the reality. They were witnessing the final chapter in the life of a man who had once seemed larger than life itself. And yet, as the minutes passed, as his heart rate gently beat against the steady rhythm of the monitors, it was not the roar of a crowd that he longed for. It was the voice of his daughter. For decades, Hulk Hogan embodied strength. He was the symbol of American wrestling might in the 80s and 90s, the ultimate good guy, the superhero in spandex. But what the world often forgot was that behind the mustache, behind the bravado, was a father who, despite his fame and flaws, loved his children more than words could ever express. And in these final hours, as his body betrayed him, there was one thing left to do: say goodbye to the little girl who once sat front row at WrestleMania, clapping wildly for the man she called Dad. Brooke Hogan had been notified earlier that morning. The message was blunt, clinical even: it's time. For a moment, she froze. She'd received health updates before, had rushed to his side during emergencies, but something about this call felt different. Final. Permanent. She couldn't make it in time. A red-eye flight wouldn't land before dawn, and her heart shattered knowing that she might never hear his voice again. "I want to see her," Hulk rasped, his voice barely a whisper through his cracked lips. He hadn't spoken much in days, but now there was urgency in his tone. The room stirred to life. A nurse quickly brought in an iPad. They propped it on a rolling tray beside his bed, adjusting the camera just enough to capture his face. His eyes, once fire-bright with charisma, now held a flickering softness, determined but fading. When the FaceTime call connected, the screen lit up with Brooke's face. Her eyes were already red, swollen from tears, her lips trembling. She tried to smile but it faltered the second she saw him. "Hi Daddy," she whispered, forcing calm into her voice. He smiled faintly. It was weak, barely a twitch of his lips, but it was there. "There's my baby girl," Brooke's voice cracked instantly. You look okay," she lied, knowing he didn't. His skin was pale, his cheeks sunken. The bandage on his chest was new, and the tube at his nose only confirmed what she feared: he was slipping. "I'm so sorry I'm not there," she cried. "No, don't you dare," he said, surprising her with the strength in his voice. "You're here. Right now. That's what matters." For a moment, they just stared at each other. Decades of memories seemed to pour into that single gaze. The road trips, the father-daughter dances, the TV shows they filmed, the times he embarrassed her in front of her friends by being too Hulk. But also the moments where he held her hand during heartbreaks, cheered her on through career missteps, and told her time and time again that she was his whole world. "Do you remember when I took you to Disneyland?" he asked, his voice now more raspy, each word a battle. Brooke smiled through tears. "Yeah. I was 5. You carried me around on your shoulders all day. I thought you were a giant." "I was your giant," he said. "You still are," she whispered. A nurse discreetly stepped back, giving them their space, knowing instinctively that this conversation was sacred. Private. "Beyond wrestling, beyond celebrity." "Brooke," he continued, pausing to steady his breath, "I need you to know something. I'm proud of you. You hear me? She nodded, weeping now. I know, Daddy. I know. No. I mean it, he insisted, straining to lift his hand closer to the camera. I've made mistakes. Too many to count. But you've always been my light. You kept me human when I forgot how to be. I didn't say it enough. You did, she cried. You always did. You said it when you looked at me. You said it when you hugged me. You said it every time you called me my little superstar. I always knew. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if absorbing her words, as if trying to etch them into his soul before it departed. I wish I had more time, he said softly. I do too, she answered, her voice breaking. I'm not afraid, he added, looking directly into the lens, as if willing her to believe it. Because I know I raised a strong woman. Stronger than me. Brooke bit her lip to keep from sobbing out loud. She didn't want to make this harder than it already was. I'm going to be okay, Daddy, she promised. I know, he said. And don't ever stop singing, baby. That voice, it's a gift. Let the world hear it. The screen shook slightly as Brooke nodded, unable to form words. Her hand reached toward the screen, touching it as if it could bridge the distance. Hogan mirrored her, his fingers trembling as they met her digital ones. For a few eternal seconds, it was as if the camera, the hospital, the pain, all disappeared. There was only love. Raw, imperfect, but unbreakable. Tell Mick I love him, he added, referring to his son. Tell everyone, but especially you. You were always my heart, Brooke. Always. Brooke tried to respond, but her voice collapsed into sobs. I love you, Daddy. I love you so much. His eyes, glossy with tears, blinked slowly. I'll always be with you. Just, listen for me in the waves. I'll be there. And then, for the last time, Hulk Hogan raised his hand, his famous hand, the same one that once pointed to the heavens after body-slamming giants, and gave her a faint thumbs up. Whatcha gonna do, when Daddy's love runs wild in you? The screen froze for a moment as the signal trembled. Then it ended. Brooke screamed. Back in the hospital room, the monitor beeped slower and slower. The nurses rushed in, their movements brisk and efficient. But for Terry Bollea, the moment had come. His last act had not been a wrestling match, a pay-per-view, or a sold-out stadium. It had been a farewell. Quiet. Honest. Gut-wrenchingly human. Word spread quickly among WWE staff and close friends. Triple H, who had been kept updated throughout Hogan's decline, made the call to send the company's private jet to Brooke if she needed it. Vince McMahon, long retired but still emotionally attached to his biggest star, reportedly locked his office door and didn't speak for hours. Ric Flair, his longtime rival and brother-in-arms, wept openly in a phone interview with TMZ, unable to complete his sentence. He was more than a friend, he was family. Outside the hospital, fans began to gather. Some held signs. Others wore vintage Hulkamania shirts. A few just stood silently, watching the windows above, waiting for news they already feared had arrived. Inside the hospital room, the nurses gently removed the oxygen mask from Terry's face. His expression was peaceful, like a man who had said everything he needed to say. A man who left the world not as a warrior in a ring, but as a father saying goodbye. Brooke arrived a few hours later, mascara streaking her cheeks, hands shaking as she stepped into the room. The nurse had left the door open just a crack. She walked in slowly, as if fearing her next breath would break her. Her father's body was still. The machines were silent now. She approached the bed and sat beside him. You kept your promise, she whispered. You waited for me. Even if it was just through a screen. Then, as the sun finally crept above the horizon, painting the room in gold, Brooke Hogan rested her head on her father's chest and cried. No longer the daughter of a legend, but simply a daughter who had just lost her hero. The hours that followed were a blur of phone calls, security detail coordination, and family statements. But for Brooke, everything moved in slow motion. Nothing mattered. Not the paparazzi beginning to swarm outside, Not the reporters dialing her phone relentlessly, not the WWE PR team asking for a quote. All that mattered was the stillness in that hospital bed. The man who once lifted 300-pound giants over his head now lay motionless, and in that moment, no championship belt or Hall of Fame ring could bring him back. She sat by his side long after the doctors had left. She ran her fingers gently through his thinning blonde hair and studied his face, those deeply familiar features that, for much of the world, had symbolized invincibility. But to her, he was just Dad. Her protector. Her anchor. The man who once carried her on his shoulders as crowds roared around them. The man who always checked under the bed for monsters, even when the real monsters were the headlines in the tabloids that attacked them both. There had been difficult years, public scandals, legal troubles, and wounds that took years to heal. But none of that mattered now. In these sacred, final hours, forgiveness came easy. All the pain, all the missteps, all the noise of celebrity faded into the background. What remained was the quiet ache of love. She took her phone from her purse and opened the voice memos app. Through tears, she whispered into it, "I just want the world to know that behind the legend was a man who never stopped loving his kids. I wish you could have seen how he looked at us. I wish you could have heard how his voice softened every time he said, 'I'm proud of you.' He wasn't perfect, but he was mine." She paused, hit save, and titled the audio file, "My Father, My Hero." That clip would later go viral. But in that moment, she wasn't thinking about fame or followers. She just wanted something to hold on to, a sound, a memory, something to fight back against the hollow stillness now hanging in the as the day stretched on, tributes began pouring in from across the wrestling world and beyond. John Cena posted a black and white photo of Hogan from WrestleMania 3 with just 3 words beneath it, "Thank you, brother." Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson recorded a short video from the set of his latest movie, visibly shaken, his voice cracking as he recounted how Hogan had mentored him during his early days in WWE. "He called me after my first match," The Rock said. "Said I had it, that I reminded him of himself. I never forgot that." Social media turned into a river of memories. Fans shared stories, some had met him at signings, others had watched him with their dads growing up. Many posted the same clip of Hogan slamming Andre the Giant, the same moment over and over again, but now it played like a farewell. A thunderous act of strength that, decades later, stood in contrast to the fragile man who passed away in a hospital bed with his daughter on FaceTime. Back in that room, Brooke still hadn't moved. Eventually, a nurse entered gently and touched her shoulder. "Would you like to help us prepare him?" Brooke nodded. Her voice had gone somewhere distant, but her heart was locked in. With slow, reverent hands, she helped remove the tangled wires, gently placed a fresh white cloth over his chest, and brushed his hair one last time. When she was done, she reached into her purse again, this time pulling out something unexpected. A red and yellow bandana. She knelt beside the bed, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "One last time, Dad. One last time for the fans." Then, with shaking hands, she tied it around his head. "He's ready," she told the nurse. The hospital staff, many of whom had grown up watching Hogan, stood silently as his body was wheeled down the hall. No one spoke. No announcements were made. Just the low squeak of the wheels echoing down the corridor, and the silent salute of a generation saying goodbye to one of its heroes. Later that night, Brooke returned to her hotel room. It was a suite the WWE had secured for her, high above the city, quiet, removed. She stood by the window, staring down at the lights, still wearing the same clothes she had on when she said goodbye. Her phone buzzed nonstop, calls from journalists, messages from childhood friends, even a voicemail from Vince McMahon himself. But the one call she wanted would never come again. She walked to the minibar and pulled out 2 mini bottles of Jack Daniels. One for her. One for him. It was their tradition. Anytime something big happened, good or bad, Hulk would say, "Let's toast to surviving it, brother." She poured them both, set one beside a framed photo of him she had brought from home, and whispered, "We survived it, Dad. We did." Then, with trembling hands, she raised the glass. "To you. To the man who made millions cheer, but who always saved his softest voice for me." She drank. Downstairs, in the lobby, fans had already started leaving flowers. By morning, the building's front steps would be blanketed in yellow roses, WWE action figures, childhood drawings, and notes scrawled in messy handwriting. "You were my hero." The news hit global outlets by sunrise. Wrestling legend Hulk Hogan dies at 71. Daughter was on FaceTime during his final moments. CNN played a tribute montage on loop. ESPN paused their sports news ticker just to display a quote from Hogan's 1987 speech to the fans: "Train, say your prayers, and eat your vitamins." But the final clip they showed was from a lesser-known moment. It was Hogan holding Brooke at a Hall of Fame ceremony, whispering something to her off-mic. No one knew what he had said, but Brooke did. He said, "You're my legacy. Not the belts. Not the fame. You." In the days that followed, the WWE announced a special tribute episode of SmackDown. The entire show would be dedicated to Hogan. Superstars from every generation were invited to appear, and the main event would be a 10-bell salute in his honor. But before that episode aired, WWE aired a pre-taped message from Brooke. She sat in the same hospital room. The camera captured her with no makeup, no glam. Just truth. "My dad gave his life to wrestling. But he gave his soul to his family," she said softly. "He taught me that being strong doesn't mean hiding your tears. It means standing up when it hurts, when you're scared, when you've lost everything, and saying, 'I'm still here.'" She looked down, breathing slowly. "He's not here anymore. But the love he gave me? That stays. Forever." The screen faded to black. A single phrase appeared: "In memory of Terry Bollea, 1953 to 2025. The realest champion of all." At WrestleMania the following year, WWE unveiled a statue in his honor. Life-sized, bronze, and immortalized mid-flex, it stood not far from the one of Andre the Giant, poetic, in its own way. But it wasn't the pose that broke people. It was the inscription carved into the base. Just 7 words: "Dad, you were always my superhero." Brooke. That statue was unveiled under a sky that couldn't decide whether to cry or shine. Some fans wept. Others cheered. But in that moment, Hulkamania didn't die, it transformed. From a movement, into a memory, from an icon, into a father, and from a character, into a legacy. The day of the WWE tribute show arrived with the kind of weight that's hard to describe. It wasn't just another episode of SmackDown, it was a reckoning. A final bow. A collective goodbye, not only from fans, but from generations of wrestlers who had either shared the ring with Hulk Hogan or walked the path he paved. The arena, usually echoing with pyrotechnics and crowd chants, was unusually quiet during the opening. Black banners hung across the rafters. A single spotlight shone on a red and yellow feather boa draped gently over the middle rope of an empty ring. There were no theme songs. No grand entrances, just silence, and then the bell rang once, twice, 3 times. Each strike echoed like thunder across the hushed crowd. 4.5.6. A fan in the upper section whispered, "Thank you, Hogan." 7.8. Someone else began to cry. 9. 10. The screen faded to black for a moment before the Titantron lit up with a video montage. But this wasn't your typical WWE highlight reel. It didn't start with chair shots or WrestleMania pops. It opened with home video footage. Grainy clips of a young Brooke being twirled around by her father in their Florida backyard. Shots of Hogan fixing her bike. Teaching her how to swim. Whispering "You've got this" before she took the stage at a school talent show. Only then did it cut to the matches, the slams, the leg drops, the title wins. Hulkamania in full force. But even amidst the explosions and arena chaos, the camera always found him looking for his kids. Waving to them in the front row. Blowing kisses after matches. Carrying Brooke backstage on his shoulder after main events like she was the belt he was most proud of. The voiceover was Brooke's. Recorded in the same hospital room where he died, he gave everything to the fans. Every night, he broke his body just to make people cheer. But behind closed doors, he was our dad. He danced like an idiot in the kitchen. He told the worst jokes. He never stopped believing in us, even when the world didn't. The crowd in the arena watched in stunned silence. Some wiped their eyes. Others clutched Hulkamania signs they'd brought with them as children and dusted off just for this night. In the front row, Stephanie McMahon could be seen dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Triple H, stoic as ever, kept his arm around her. Roman Reigns, once just a kid when Hogan was headlining WrestleMania, stood backstage watching on the monitor, visibly emotional. The tribute match that followed wasn't about storylines or championship implications. It featured legends and new stars alike, John Cena, Randy Orton, Cody Rhodes, and a surprise return from The Undertaker, who, for the first time in years, broke character and addressed the crowd as Mark Calloway. "There aren't many people who walk into a room and the air just changes," he said, voice shaking. Terry was one of those men. He taught us that being larger than life starts with heart. And he had the biggest heart in this business. As Undertaker stepped out of the ring, the lights dimmed and the Titantron played the final voicemail Hulk Hogan had left for Brooke, recorded 2 weeks before his death. It wasn't meant for public ears. But Brooke had given WWE her blessing to share it with the world. "Hey baby, just wanted to tell you I'm proud of you. Every day. Don't let the world make you forget who you are. I see your strength. I feel it. And if there's a day you feel alone, just remember, I'm never really gone. I'm always with you. Always." The crowd broke. The sobs were audible. Grown men, veterans of countless wrestling wars, stood silently wiping their faces. It was a moment where the character of Hulk Hogan was eclipsed by the vulnerability of Terry Bollea. Where the image of a legend took second place to the legacy of a father. Backstage, superstars lined up to sign a memorial wall erected by WWE for the occasion. The wall was soon covered with notes: "Thank you for believing in me. My first hero. You inspired me to pick up a mic." Some scrawled inside jokes. Others just wrote, "Rest easy, one brother." Message, written in gold marker and circled by stars, simply read, "Tell Macho Man we said hello." The next day, Hulk Hogan's family held a private funeral service in Clearwater, Florida. It was intimate. No camera crews. No entrance music. Just family, a few close friends, and a soft ocean breeze that drifted over the small crowd gathered to say their goodbyes. The casket was closed, adorned with the same bandana Brooke had placed on his head that night in the hospital. A bouquet of yellow roses lay atop it, alongside a folded Hulkamania shirt and a faded photo of a young Hogan holding both his children on a beach. A minister led the ceremony, speaking softly about redemption, legacy, and the power of love over fame. Brooke stood last. Her speech was short, but it pierced everyone's heart. "I shared my dad with the world," she said. "And that was hard sometimes. He was everyone's hero. But at the end of the day, when the lights went off, when the ring was packed away, when the crowd went home, he was just dad. And he always made sure we knew we mattered more than any championship." She took a deep breath. "And if you ever wonder what he would have wanted from you, just love your people. Loudly. Relentlessly. That's what he did for me. Right to the very end." She stepped down, and as she walked away, the first chords of Real American began to play softly. Not through speakers, but from a single acoustic guitar. It was raw. Gentle. Almost haunting. Played not to hype a crowd, but to serenade a legend home. Later that evening, Brooke returned to the beach where she and her father had once built sandcastles as a child. She carried with her a small urn, the weight of it both grounding and impossible. As the sun dipped below the horizon, she waded into the surf and let the waves take him. Her final act of love. A return to the ocean he had so often told her brought him peace. She stayed there for hours, watching the tide roll in, listening to the sound of the wind. And when she finally rose to leave, she whispered the same words he had told her during their last call: "Whatcha gonna do when daddy's love runs wild in you?" Then she walked away, into a world forever changed, but never without him. In the days and weeks that followed, the world of wrestling seemed to move in slow motion. It wasn't just the loss of a superstar, it was the loss of a foundation. Hulk Hogan wasn't just a chapter in wrestling's history books, he was the ink, the paper, the very binding that held eras together. Without him, something felt incomplete. As if the circus had lost its ringmaster. As if the arena lights had dimmed just a little more permanently. Brooke returned to Los Angeles a few weeks later, trying to find some rhythm to life again. But everything was different. Her phone still rang, her inbox overflowed, and fans continued to send tributes and art and poems and childhood photos of themselves wearing Hulkamania gear. But nothing could fill the space her father had left behind. One afternoon, she sat in her father's old home gym in Clearwater, now silent and used, but still filled with the scent of iron and dust. His bandanas were still pinned to the wall. His workout log, dated 2 years back, still rested on the bench press. As she walked across the room, her fingers trailed along the outlines of old posters, one of which had always stood out, a limited edition print of Hogan staring into the camera, fist clenched, with the words, "Believe in something bigger." Tears welled in her eyes. He had spent his entire life making people believe. In strength. In redemption. In second chances. In rising again even when the odds were stacked to the ceiling. And that belief, it hadn't died with him. It had simply changed form. In a quiet moment, Brooke decided to launch something new. Not a tribute show, not a wrestling special, but a foundation. The Terry Bollea Legacy Foundation, dedicated to children battling terminal illness, young performers trying to break into the entertainment industry, and former athletes struggling with health complications in retirement. "It's not about the character," she said during the launch announcement, standing at the very spot in WWE HQ where her father had signed his final contract decades earlier. "It's about the man who never stopped caring." The wrestling community rallied around her. John Cena donated $250,000. Stephanie McMahon offered WWE's full support. The Rock posted a video from Hawaii, saying, "Terry helped me become The Rock. Now it's time we help carry his legacy for generations to come." But nothing prepared Brooke for the moment she walked back into Madison Square Garden. The same arena where her father once electrified crowds, where chants of Hogan shook the floorboards and brought generations of fans to their feet. WWE had planned a tribute event there, with proceeds benefiting the foundation. As Brooke stepped onto the entrance ramp, the lights dimmed, and the arena filled with the sound of his iconic theme song. But this time, there was no performer at the top of the ramp. No hulking silhouette. No raised hand, just a lone spotlight, shining on an empty entrance ramp, and then the crowd erupted. Not in cheers, but in a standing ovation. A slow, swelling crescendo of applause that echoed like thunder, wrapping the moment in reverence. Tears flowed. Some fans held their children on their shoulders, passing the memory of Hulk Hogan to a new generation that may never see him live, but would grow up knowing his name, his heart, and his thunderous voice shouting, "Whatcha gonna do, brother?" When the lights returned, a giant screen lit up behind the ring. It showed a single message: "Heroes may fade, but legends never die." Brooke stood in the middle of the ring, overcome by emotion. The crowd hushed as she took the mic. "He lived in this ring. He lived in your hearts. And now, he lives in something bigger, something eternal." She pointed up toward the heavens. "Say your prayers. Eat your vitamins. Love harder than you think you can. And always believe in yourself, even when the world tells you not to." The crowd erupted one final time, chanting in unison, "Thank you, Hogan. Thank you, Hogan." Backstage, several wrestlers stood in silence watching the scene. Kevin Owens wiped away a tear. Sami Zayn clapped slowly, whispering, "He's still here. You can feel it." Even Paul Heyman, who had spent years working both with and against Hogan, shook his head and muttered, "The man didn't just work the business, he was the business." As the event ended, Brooke walked alone to the locker room that had once been her father's. WWE staff had preserved it. Still filled with memorabilia, boots, the iconic belt, and a framed photograph of Terry holding baby Brooke with a wide smile stretched across his face. She sat on the bench, her fingers trembling as they traced the photo frame. "I hope I made you proud," she whispered. From outside, a faint chant still echoed through the arena. "Hogan. Hogan. Hogan." Weeks passed. The news cycle shifted. New stars rose. New champions were crowned. But one thing became clear: Hulk Hogan's presence had become spiritual. He was the ghost in the ring ropes. The energy in every standing ovation. The story told in every young wrestler's promo about chasing dreams, never giving up, and doing it for their family. Back in California, Brooke began assembling a documentary using